Hello, everyone, and welcome to this follow-up meeting about the Irving Street sites. This was requested by the community at the last meeting in June. We also received requests to meet in person at the last meeting, and we'll continue to look for those opportunities in the near future. My name is Asha Sethi, and I'm a public participation specialist with the California Department of Toxic Substances Control. I'll be facilitating the Q&A portion of this meeting. We received a number of questions from the Mid-Sunset Neighborhood Association, and I'd like to thank Paul Folsman for compiling these and sending our way just yesterday. I have a few opening announcements to get us started. This meeting is being recorded. Whit, can you go back to the previous slide? And in just a few minutes, we'll include a link to the presentation in the meeting chat, which you can find in the toolbar below. You've all entered with cameras and mics turned off. We do have Cantonese interpretation available for this meeting. To select the language option, you can click on the globe interpretation icon at the bottom of the screen and select Chinese. And now I'll ask Carnation Liu, our Cantonese interpreter, to announce these directions in Cantonese on the English channel. Thank you, Carnation. Live transcription is also available. You'll click on the CC icon in the toolbar if you'd like to see subtitles. And at this meeting, we do have additional staff. Whit, can you go to the previous slide? That we'd like to introduce you to. So I'll be handing it over to Nalene and Julie, who will introduce themselves shortly. And also my colleague James Gambrill is assisting on the back end. Okay, next slide, please. Now I'll go over how to participate. Could you go back to the previous slide, Whit? Thank you. Now I'll go over how to participate in this Zoom webinar. MSNA requested that we go through their questions during this meeting, and we'll do our best to get to as many of them as possible. We'd also like to hear from others in the community. So we'll aim to intersperse blocks of questions from MSNA and hear from others as well. We'll take questions either through the Q&A feature or the raise hand feature in the toolbar. And then when we call on you, you'll be able to unmute yourself at that time. And for anyone calling in on the Zoom line, you can raise your hand by dialing *9. And then when we call on you, dial *6 to unmute yourself. And I'll also be checking in with our Cantonese interpreter, Carnation, as well. Next slide, please. Whit, next slide. Thank you. Now I'll go over the agenda for this meeting. We wanted to keep it focused on Q&A, but since it's been a couple of months, we do have a short presentation to provide an update. We'll try and get through it quickly. You can use the presentation as a reference. We'll move through it quickly. There is more written content there. I'll be handing it off to Nalene and Julie for a welcome first, and then Whit will provide that program update I was referring to. And then after that, we'll get to the Q&A portion of the meeting. We're always open to your feedback on how to structure future meetings, and we'll do our best to try and accommodate this request. That's it for opening announcements, and I'd like to hand it over to Nalene Kobel, who's the Division Chief of the Site Mitigation and Restoration Program for Northern California.
Thank you, Asha, and welcome everyone. I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to have all of you here with us today. As Asha mentioned, I'm the Chief of the Northern California Division of the Cleanup Program at DTSC, and so you understand where I am organizationally. Right now, I report directly to the director of our department. I know this project is of great importance to your neighborhood, and that's why I'm here. I appreciate the time and effort you spent sharing your concerns. And tonight I'm here primarily to listen and to support the project in any way I can. I'll hand it off to Julie Pettijohn.
Okay. Hi. Thanks for the introduction, Nalene. So as the branch chief for the Berkeley Site Mitigation and Restoration Program, I do work directly under Nalene, and I am responsible for cleanup projects from San Benito, sort of Monterey County to the south, north to the Oregon border, so the coastal properties. And much of this work actually is in the San Francisco Bay Area. I am charged with overseeing the overall work of my branch, including decision documents, and that these meet applicable requirements before they're released for public review and comment. I want to assure you that we do consider public comments and feedback received, and we do make adjustments where necessary and where appropriate. And one of the reasons I think Nalene had already said this, why we're here tonight, is to listen to your feedback, your comments, your questions, concerns. And another reason is to reassure you that we are engaged in the work in your neighborhood, and we do take seriously the department's mission of protection of public health and the environment. This is for all sites, not just the Irving neighborhood sites that we're here to talk about tonight. And I do look forward to hearing more from you. So Whit, I'm going to pass it along to you.
Great. All right, a quick update on activities since our last meeting in late June. I'm just showing the sites here briefly for those attendees who may be joining the meeting for the first time. This is the former Police Credit Union site, now owned by TNDC. This is a cluster of residences north of the former Police Credit Union site. The right-of-way of Irving Street. This is a parking lot comprising 3 parcels owned by Tpcu. This is what we refer to as the Albrite cleaner site. And this is 1326th Avenue. And I will have screenshots of each of these sites just to kind of tie you back into them as we proceed through the presentation. As Asha said earlier, we have content on here for multiple audiences. I'm going to touch on sort of high points quickly for the public, but there's more detail in the documentation for consultants or others who may be interested in that.
Whit, do you mind turning your camera on if possible?
Of course. Thank you for the reminder. Okay. Just the summary slide from the last presentation. PCE is the primary contaminant of concern, commonly used in dry cleaning operations, still found in some consumer products, in the process of being phased out in California and nationally. The residences, based on the data collected to date, are safe to occupy, including sensitive populations like children and the elderly. DTSC does not expect to see adverse health effects based on the levels of PCE that have been found thus far in indoor air. Evidence of a PCE source area, a release source area, has not yet been found at Tpcu nor Albrite, but investigation is ongoing. The distribution of PCE may be most concentrated in the Irving Street right-of-way, judging from soil gas concentration contours, suggesting that PCE may have been, as one contributing source, historically discharged into the sewer systems, which can leak at points in operational history. So this is the order of the sites that we will discuss, and the acronyms that we will be covering them by. So TPCU refers to the Police Credit Union, and you can refer back to this slide to understand addresses, what regulatory framework they're under. But we'll be covering in this order the offsite investigation to the north that was commenced by TPCU. The TNDC low-income housing project that's in its entitlements phase. TPC owns an empty lot that's comprises 3 parcels that's currently being used as a parking lot. So we'll call that the TPCU parking lot. There's the former Albrite Cleaners dry cleaning facility. This address and 1326th Avenue is a voluntary agreement site. Asha, we have a question I gather from the audience. Do we want to take them now or get through the presentation first and then get into questions?
I think you should go ahead and go through your presentation first, Whit, and we'll get there.
Perfect. Okay, great. Let's see. So an update on TPC. On these are the residences to the north. This is a a VI assessment that was started by Tpcu, who is no longer engaged in that activity. So this is an important issue for the meeting. The residents have some current concerns about scheduling of September versus winter sampling. We'll delve into that more later in the meeting, and we'll allocate time to discuss that issue. But at a high level, the next event that was tentatively planned was to be doing indoor air sampling 3 days mid-month in September, with a goal of completing kind of the typical baseline testing that we require to conduct vapor intrusion assessment. This month was selected to get the dry soil, warm temperature, seasonal condition to complement the data that DTSC collected in March of this year. Another goal is to, as best we can by physical removal or kind of segregated testing, isolate the effects of consumer products on indoor air, and to also document outdoor ambient air contamination that may be contributing to what's being measured indoors. Let's see, next up is TNDC. My colleague Parag, our project manager, will cover this. Yeah.
Hi, how's it going? Thank you for joining tonight. This slide over here, as what said, covers TNDC and the updates we got. So DTSC is provided TNDC's timeline for implementation and construction. TNDC is receiving approvals and permits from City of San Francisco for building demolition anticipated to begin later this year, and start of new slab planned for early 2024. Next slide. And these next two slides will cover the updates regarding the Tpcu parking lot. DTSC is working with SFDPH on our approval process for the 3 parcels. These are also called entitlements. And then, yeah, that's pretty much it. Next slide. Yeah, so DTSC notified Tpcu that DTSC does consider prior soil vapor data for site as disclosable information for a prospective buyer. SF Planning will keep us posted for any potential buyers to whom we will enter into a DTSC voluntary agreement. And next slide.
Thanks, Parag. I will cover Albrite cleaners. So just, a recap from the June meeting results. There were 12 soil samples collected, no detections. So this is all in the June 23rd slide deck. There was soil vapor data generated as well. And all for ease of access, all that data was available in the June data set. So you can go in there, you can find all the concentrations, all the tag numbers, all the depths. So an easy place to get all that information. We received the draft phase 1 report on July 1st. The report lacked some of the requested historical sewer network mapping that DTSC wanted, but that is now planned to be included in a forthcoming phase 2 investigation report. DTSC didn't expect it, but we were delighted to see that our phase 2 work plan had been submitted in conjunction with the phase 1 report. With the work plan element, which will require a little more back and forth to get concurrence on, that aggregate document will probably not be available to the public until later this fall. The phase 2 draft work plan scope, which again is still, it's a draft, it's in comment and discussion, includes the network mapping of a portion of the neighborhood, an underground camera survey of the private sewer lateral from the building to the public street, including trying to identify any unknown historical routes that may have affected historical releases, but that we're not aware of today. And then to understand condition and if we see anything that may constitute a very conspicuous leak point, that may be or a point for leakage of sewage and therefore potentially chemicals. That would be another item to find. We'll also be collecting a gas sample from that private sewer lateral. And the reason we're doing that is we're seeing the highest signatures in the street currently. And this would be one building worth of data to understand whether we're seeing those sorts of concentrations preferentially move back into buildings through their private sewer laterals as they run from the building and connect to the main in the street. Additional scope will include indoor air sampling of both the former dry cleaner equipment room and then the main commercial space on the ground floor. And testing will occur under sort of normal building ventilation conditions, and the team will endeavor to remove potentially confounded chemical products prior to testing. There will also be a concurrent air sample to get outdoor air signals that may be influencing what we measure indoor. And DTSC is working with Albrite on potentially additional scope. 1326 Avenue, again, this entity is prudentially working with us on a voluntary basis. We have, this is the preliminary work plan. The work plan just hit today. We haven't had a chance to open it yet, but this is what we were expecting in our prior negotiation with them. Resampling indoor air and soil vapor at prior locations. Again, in a different season, this one, reflecting different soil moisture and temperature. Soil moisture is maybe the most important parameter for us in terms of the seasonality of when we sample. Collecting indoor air samples at new locations in the building, including the lobby, the boiler room, and a residential, some sampling in the residential floors immediately above the non-residential spaces at ground level. We'll be putting 2 new permanent soil vapor probes in the garage and the glass shop. Those are things that we can't be pre-decisional, but one response action for management can be long-term, focused monitoring with known attenuation factors that determine empirically. And this investigation infrastructure, could potentially serve that role if that approach were selected in a decision document. Additionally, the building owner is going to be installing 2 new permanent nested soil vapor probes kind of in the southwest and northeast corner of their building in the right-of-way, just so they can capture any potential signals that may manifest from a hypothetical sewer line borne release that might be running through other sewer segments that we don't have data near thus far in the program. Let's see. On a separate matter, we received an anonymous inquiry about construction work in this building that had opened up the garage floor at several locations for a seismic retrofit. And we went out twice, once in July, once in August, with field instrumentation to see whether that was materially changing indoor air quality by one instrument, a PID that measures sort of aggregate VOCs. We couldn't see any measurable emissions coming from the temporary floor openings. We did see some VOCs in other parts of the building, principally the commercial shop on the north side of the building. We went back later with a portable GC where we were able to measure individual types of compounds, get lower detection limits. The aggregate conclusions were that we found no acute kind of exposure levels of PC being measurable. We weren't seeing much measurable coming out of the openings in the floor that were temporary. We did see some VOC levels that kind of increased as you approached the glass shop. And what the GC indicated was that those were relatively non-toxic alcohol alcohols, and those chemicals were also observed during operation of the business that day. So routine chemical use in the course of business is not under DTSC jurisdiction. So we've been coordinating with SFDPH on these sites, and we alerted them to some of the VOC levels that were measured, and SFDPH is reaching out to the business owner with its sister agencies in San Francisco, just to make sure the business is availing itself of the various compliance programs for businesses of that type. All right, quick summary of the current phase 2 scope. Again, we have draft work plans, so the scope may increase, but the new scope is indicated in purple at bottom here. This is the prior 15-foot contour information that we presented at the June meeting. That probably is the best indication of deeper signal of potential source areas. So there'll be additional indoor air samples, sewer sample, and an outdoor air sample at Albrite in this next phase. Additional points, as discussed previously, you can refer back to the slide shown in purple here for 1326th Avenue. Asha, I will turn it back to you.
Thanks for the presentation, Whit. And now we're going to go through a block of questions submitted by MSNA. They submitted 10 questions, a few of which have multiple parts. They've asked me to read each question on their behalf, and then we'll go to the project team for a response. And then I'll go ahead and unmute Don Moore and Lenny Siegel as they've requested. We'll try to provide a brief summary of the information so that we can get through many of the questions tonight. And then we'll provide a written response that's more detailed, as well as include any questions that we weren't able to get to. So Don, you have your hand up. Let me see if you have a question for us before we dive in here.
Thank you, Asha. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yeah, welcome.
Yeah, so actually there's a question that came up, and this was for Julie based on, before we get into our 10 questions. Yeah, Julie, you mentioned the DTSC mission, and, we've seen the DTSC mission statement in the community updates. It's to protect the people, communities, and environment of California from harmful chemicals by cleaning up contaminated sites. So why in this situation, when the cleanup remedy is so obvious and active remediation being consistent with DTSC guidance and understanding vapor mitigation is an interim measure, why is the DTSC not taking the parties in these multiple sites who have huge financial interest in developing these properties and not applying $1 million that it would take to clean up this whole plume? And Asha, we appreciate the slides, but why don't you put up our plume map? Because that's the conceptual site model people need to see. Can you do that?
I think we have a lot to cover in this meeting. Maybe we can make arrangements at another meeting, to follow this one where we can get into that.
Get into what?
Well, I'm just concerned we won't be able to get through the 10 questions that you've posed.
No, okay, well, I'm looking for a response to this first question because This is fundamentally the heart of this thing. Why isn't cleanup being proposed and conducted when the obvious remedial action is staring everyone in the face, including the Albrite consultant? They know SVE will work. I've consulted with the Apex companies, remediation expert, 30 years. Soil vapor extraction is a slam dunk here. RMD Environmental, DTSC's own contractor, supported SVE cost estimating, showing that the north side to clean up The north side of Irving is less than $500,000, which is, I think, $200,000 less than TNDC's proposed vapor mitigation system. So that's at the heart of this thing. Why is cleanup not occurring when it's staring everyone in the face? We're going to have the north side demolished here in a couple months. Why not get out there and do an SVE pilot test? Everyone knows it's going to be effective. It just is a matter of how effective. But I'm sorry, I got the floor, so I need to say this for the community. But my question to Julie stands. Why aren't we cleaning this up consistent with the DTSC mission?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much, Don, for that question. Julie, would you like to take that?
Sure. I'll have a brief response, and I do know that we have some materials that are prepared to speak directly with respect to soil vapor extraction. There is a process that we follow, and for many of the sites that we're working on, we're still very much in the site characterization phase. So figuring out what is the problem there. The process that we follow, and I know most people, have some familiarity with this if they've been attending the regular meetings, is, identify what the lateral and vertical extent of the contamination is. Then the next step would be, sort of risk assessment, what people are being exposed, at what levels are they being exposed, and then moving on to the remedy decision. So, in terms of SVE, certainly, I have engineers who can, go into much greater detail on that. But the remedy that was selected for the property that you are specifically talking about, the one that will have the proposed redevelopment, that currently is a vapor mitigation system. And, soil vapor extraction systems, to the best of my knowledge, really work best when you have found a source. And we're still looking for sources. So I'm going to kind of leave it at that. And if there are other DTSC folks that would like to chime in further, please feel free to do so.
Well, Julie, just to follow on to that, there's been no source investigation on the property that we're talking about here. There's been no sampling done in the footprint of the former Miracle Cleaners. So, it's unfortunate that the police credit union banked a bunch of money on the sale of this property and walked away from their voluntary cleanup agreement. There's been no source investigation in the footprint of former Miracle Cleaners. Mm-hmm. We've got concentrations on the outer edges of the plume that have increased 50-fold over the last 18 months. So you approved, the decision's already been made. You could have commented on the TNDC response plan and said, consistent with, first of all, DTSC guidance says for VOCs in soil, excavation, or SVE. That's 2010 DTSC guidance. Mm-hmm. And then there's new guidance that says permanent remediation is preferred over mitigation, and mitigation is considered interim. And so there could have been a comment on the response plan. Arthur Machado could have said, hey, SVE makes sense here. It's consistent with our guidance. It's consistent with SVE guidance, with vapor intrusion guidance. Maybe you should consider this. This path forward response plan was pushed through. We were blown off on our comments, and there's a window of opportunity for a solution here. And this is for, all of you at DTSC, all these parties, TNDC, Police Credit Union, they want to develop their market race housing on the southern side of the block. They're going to have a huge financial upside, but you know what? They're going to enter a voluntary cleanup, and they're just going to say, we want to slap a vapor barrier on it because they did it across the street. There's enough money here. If you guys could pull this together, and get Police Credit Union back to the table where they need to be, it's in your hands. And the Board of Supervisors of San Francisco, Gordon Marr, supervisor, we passed a resolution here in San Francisco that states just what I'm saying here: clean up before construction. It's completely feasible. The money's there. We need help from DTSC. And, if I'm sound emotional, I am. This has been held inside for a long time. But you needed to hear this from the community, because I'm a professional geologist. I'm representing Mid-Sunset Neighborhood Association, and we're kind of just tired of these updates that just talk over us and don't address the core issues of environmental justice. I mean, we have residents here that have been exposed to PCE for decades above DTSC screening levels, breathing it while they raise their children in their homes, and we're getting flipped off by TNDC and the DTSC saying, "Oh, there's no issues here." I got sites in Belmont and Santa Barbara where the state is requiring mitigation or remediation using an action level of the ESL, 10 to the -6. That's not being proposed or happening here. There's a window of opportunity here, and we need your help to clean this up. And Asha, I mean, I don't think it's hard to put the plume on the screen right now. You got the file, right? It's a PDF. Can you just share that and show everyone what this looks like?
So Don, you said a lot that I'd like us to unpack, and I'm wondering if many of the questions that you've posed were reflected in the questions that you sent to us. So I'm wondering if we can't just go through a block of those and try and kind of actually get into all those questions that you had sent to us yesterday, and then we'll see make some progress on that, and perhaps after we get through some of that content, we can see how much time we have left. Does that work for you?
If it worked for Paul, does that work for us, Paul and Flo? Yeah, no, Asha, I thank you for the opportunity to speak. I appreciate it. Anyway, I hope that message resonates, and we're happy to go through all the questions.
Okay.
Yeah, Asha, did you unmute me?
I did, yeah, because Don was asking for you or Flo to speak, so I was just trying to encourage you to weigh in here.
Yeah, well, a lot of the questions were contained in what Don said, and I think he said it very articulately. So it's really, I think, what we're looking for is a discussion with you about this, and I think that Don set the table quite well for the discussion. So we'd like to hear from Ms. Pettijohn and Ms. Cowbell as well.
Okay, great. Well, what do you think about, let's see, I just want to be mindful of the time we have and how best to use it. So a suggestion I have is that we start getting through the questions that you've posed. And, Don touched on the resolution. I was wondering, while we have Julie on camera, if she would want to talk a bit about the resolution. And what I can do maybe is just go ahead and put that question that you had wanted me to read out loud into the chat so folks can read along. And then perhaps Julie can answer this one. So I'm just going to read it out loud. In a unanimously passed resolution in July, the San Francisco Board of Supervisors made it clear they wanted DTSC to lead a coordinated and comprehensive cleanup of the 2500 block area before any construction takes place on the block. Is DTSC aware of the resolution? What is your response to it? What role do you see DTSC playing in moving this resolution forward in a timely manner? So I will go ahead and let Julie answer that, and I'll put that in the chat, and I will I will open up Lenny's mic if he wants to weigh in here.
Okay, I'm just confirming that you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay, and first I want to start with thank you for the comments. That is part of the reason why Nalene and I are here, is to listen to the comments, questions, and concerns that are coming from the community. And, it seems, or it appears to me, that a lot of what you had stated were part of the questions that, we are prepared to answer. So I am aware of and DTSC, of course, is aware of the resolution. And we are already implementing a coordinated approach to the work that's on the 2500 Irving Street block. This is, for the purpose, as we relate back to our mission to ensure protection of the residents and, of course, the commercial businesses. And, even since the very first Irving Street site came under our oversight, each additional site has been managed by the same staff. And my team is certainly reviewing the data. We're looking across all of the sites at the data in aggregate. And the purpose of that is, we need to get to the point where appropriate actions will be taken to ensure public health. We have, reached out to you all a number of times, reporting to the community, both in meetings, written updates, and I know we've answered some questions that have come in. And we're hoping to do that, looking at the larger group of properties. We do agree with you that there's more work to be done. There are data gaps, and we do need to fill those data gaps before we better understand the potential risks and take the appropriate action that I mentioned. And my team is really taking steps to ensure that. Whit told you a bit about the phase 2 investigation work plan that they're scoping, and the planning for the additional work, the indoor air work. And I do, for those folks that did have their homes tested, I do want to thank you for allowing us access to your home. It is your private space. We, try to be very careful about that. But that future data will help us, consider the eventual decision making that we need to make here. So collecting data and analyzing it, as many know, does take time and it takes care. And there is a process that we do need to follow, and of course, supporting regulations and our own internal guidance. And, before we can do a whole lot, because there's still quite a bit of characterization that still needs to be done, and filling the data gaps, we need to get through that, as I mentioned, the site characterization, before we can then move on to the other steps of the cleanup process. So as I mentioned, risk assessment, and then the decision documents, which does include a public comment period. I do want to reassure you that we are working very closely with SFDPH. The resolution had quite a bit of information about that. We are doing our best to work with SFDPH to meet the requirements for the Maher ordinance work, so Article 22A. And, we do this, we work in a lot of other areas of San Francisco as well. So we are routinely coordinating with SFDPH. We do treat the Maher ordinance requirements as requirements for our decision documents, including the response plan. And we have coordinated with SFDPH, where inspections have revealed, as Whit mentioned, that there could be some chemical management issues that do need to be addressed that do fall outside of our purview. And I do know that my team has been in regular contact with local and state elected officials regarding work in your neighborhood, and that would be Supervisor Marr, as was mentioned, Assemblymember Ting, and also Senator Wiener's offices.
Thank you, Julie. Don or Lenny, anything? Go ahead, Paul.
Let Lenny talk. Yeah, if you
sure.
Well, I mean, the basic question, it's clear that you haven't completed the characterization. You haven't done winter sampling of indoor air in the homes. You haven't sampled the soil or the soil gas. There was one vapor pen at the Miracle Cleaner site. So it's clear you're still doing characterization. So the problem that I think we have is, you're talking about a slab being thrown down on the ground early next year, probably before the characterization is completed. And that slab will make it difficult to do the kind of remediation that the community is asking for. So I wouldn't have a problem with all the characterization that you're doing. I have some specific criticisms. But the basic problem is there's not going to be any subsurface remediation at the PCU north of Irving site. And that's what the community is, I think, concerned about most. And we never heard any response to that request.
Yeah, let me just chime in also, Julie. It boggles our mind that Arthur Machado said, with the kind of response that he got from the community in terms of commenting upon the response plan, it would take 2 months to get back to us. It was finished in 3 weeks, your evaluation of it, and it just seemed like you were willing to move everything out of the way in order to get TNDC's approval. And but what we're hearing is that the site hasn't been characterized yet. There's still work to be done. We haven't made any decisions about things, but indeed you have. And as Lenny said, we're about to make it much more difficult to finish your characterization. So from the community's point of view, it felt like we were not listened to, and would love to hear your response to this.
Who would like to respond? Thanks, Julie. Oh.
Sorry, I don't often work in Zoom. I'm more used to Teams, so the controls sometimes are a little tricky for me. I hear you on the concerns of the community, and the idea about soil vapor extraction. I do know that there is, once the current slab has been removed, that demolition does provide an opportunity for us, and that's certainly something we can look at. And I don't think we can make any absolute promises right now, but that's certainly something that we would be looking at. And I will invite Whit to add anything further. He's watching this quite closely.
Yeah, so I'm not sure you've characterized the developmental cycle for the TNDC project correctly. The construction isn't slated to start until the beginning of 2024. So some of this we're going to have to cover in later questions. It's going to be a little easier for us to go through your questions than kind of play ping pong. But to the first one, as we evaluate potential RPs that might be engaged as this investigation kind of expands outward, we envision that there's probably going to be a full year where there's going to be no hardscape on the TNDC site at all, most of 2023. So I think the developmental schedule that you've characterized is inaccurate. But that's, in our—
So you'll have a great opportunity to sample the soil at the former Miracle Cleaner site and to do the kind of investigation that Albrite's doing, looking at soil, looking at the sewer lines. That's all we want to see. This investigation of Miracle that's comparable to the investigation at Albrite. I'm looking at the results at Albrite, and they're very instructive.
That's fine. Should we move to one of your next questions? To us, the questions, rather than getting a flurry of questions one atop another, the 15 or so questions that you laid out for us were somewhat modularized, and we were able to kind of put them into groups that have overlapping themes. And it might be a little more efficient and coherent for us to kind of go through the questions, if that works for you all.
Yeah, I'd like to suggest that we go to the second question that was on the list that we received from MSNA. It had to do with Albrite data, and that should go hopefully
Well,
we can
it
move
sounds
through.
like that's available. Whit, you said the Albrite data is available on GeoTracker or on EnviroStor?
Yeah, we pushed it. Normally we hold that. Normally we hold reports.
They just gave us the link.
Okay.
Just gave you the link.
Thank you.
Yeah,
so we can go past 2. Let's go to 3A. So
Don, before you blow by us, just quickly, the data was all available in the June presentation. Every soil gas point, every concentration, every tag number, every depth, everything you needed was there in June. But you have it again if you want to look at it in certified analytical form rather than kind of aggregated for you. But generally, we don't publish draft data because we sometimes find errors with analytical reports that need to be corrected. Sometimes we find data usability issues. Sometimes we don't agree with conclusions, interpretations on the part of the RPs. So it is not our practice to kind of push draft data out to the public, particularly when we made it available in June in a presentation.
Well, already. I wasn't aware of that. That wasn't pointed out. But let's move on because Lenny's obviously.
I didn't see the cell gas data. The cell gas data in June. I'm looking at that presentation now. I don't see it.
Yeah.
I
don't recollect it either. But
go to slide 15 and 16. I think you want the 15, the deep profile. It's either slide 15 or 16.
We have the data now, and we know we have it. So I think we should move on. So
May I make a suggestion, Don? Could I suggest that we move to, there's been some questions, and I know that Adam's been very patient. He's asked numerous times about.
No, he needs to. Adam needs to speak. So let's go to Adam.
Okay. Adam, I know you've sent us emails about the indoor air. I was wondering if that would be, a good next question to speak to.
Oh, hi. I just put some questions in the chat.
Okay. Do you want to go through those, or do you want to start with the indoor air? Which one would you like to take first?
I guess the one in the chat would be good.
Okay. About the first one that you have is about environmental justice and vapor barrier.
So why does the chat say it's disabled on my?
Oh, you know what? Okay, let me push out the questions from Adam. He had put it in the Q&A, so I was using that for outgoing. So, okay. Adam, would you like us to take that question first?
Yeah, you can combine my questions. That's fine.
Okay, all right. So I'll go ahead and we can go through the first question that Adam has typed in here.
Do you want me to read it?
Yeah, that'd be great from your voice.
So I just wrote, the EPA says environmental justice in practice means that everyone enjoys the same degree of protection from environmental and health hazards and equal access to the benefits of environmental resources and decision-making process. According to, this is a report that came out about equity. If the 2550 residents have the protection of a vapor barrier, they don't have to worry about cancer. That's great. But the surrounding residents who live right next to it have no protection. That seems inequitable because even if the numbers are higher at 2550, we're talking about these plumes that can move around and, may increase one year or decrease. So we don't enjoy the same degree of protection that our new neighbors are going to have. So it just seems like we want you to reconsider the vapor barrier and consider whether SVE could be a solution to protect all of us instead of just the people that live in the new building. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you. Who would like to answer Adam's questions here?
Well, the TNDC has a very specific frame. I'm sorry, my cell phone's going off in the background. I'm going to pause for a second.
Okay, and if you don't mind, when you come back, putting your camera on, that'd be great. And I see, Don, you had your hand up from before? Is that right? And Paul, was that from before?
No, my hand will be up the whole time whenever you let me speak.
Well, yeah. Well, your mic's open, so you don't even need to have your hand up. So that's fine.
I'm back, Asha.
Okay, sorry. Thank you.
Sorry about that. So yeah, there's a bunch of different overlapping issues here. So one is.
Wait, do you mind putting your camera on if possible?
Oh, not at all. Thank you for the reminder. So Adam, there's a couple of different issues here. I mean, one is that TNDC is under kind of a distinct regulatory structure that the legislature provided because they wanted entities that, didn't have contamination liability to not be discouraged from investing in inner urban areas. And TNDC fits that profile. They've been qualified for that, and their special arrangement meets the intention of the state legislature, and we have to kind of follow the state's lead in that regard. And so they get to have a VIM system for their new building. I will say that we have projects where people are building 100% low-income housing in other communities, San Mateo, and we work with them, and often VIM systems are being voluntarily put in just to be protective, because groundwater plumes and vapor intrusion, they can be from things that nobody's aware of. They're uncharacterized plumes. They could be from future plumes that could happen down the road. So we have sites where it's just being done prudentially as kind of good building practice, not even as part of something that we require in a decision document.
And I think these other sites are irrelevant to what we're talking about here.
Well, Don, no, it's not a black and white thing. There's a couple overlapping things. One of them is Clara.
So DTSC had the opportunity to comment on the response plan that was presented by Path Forward on behalf of TNDC. You or Arthur or someone at DTSC could have commented and said, okay, what's obviously missing from this is soil vapor extraction. Why don't you comment on that? And then, I work with DTSC. I've worked with DTSC for over 30 years. Okay. So you have the opportunity to comment and suggest that consistent with DTSC guidance,
it's not consistent with DTSC guidance.
No, look at the 2010 DTSC guidance regarding VOCs in soil. There's two solutions: excavation or soil vapor extraction. So you could have commented on that. And then you could have also commented on that, wait a minute, vapor mitigation is not a permanent solution. It's interim. And so you could have commented, and they could have looked at it and shown what we've seen using a DTSC approved contractor supporting a cost estimate for soil vapor extraction cheaper than the vapor mitigation system. So I just can't reconcile that you guys sort of missed the opportunity. And like Paul said earlier, Arthur was saying, it's going to take 2 months to sort through all these comments. But, we got blown off, and you did two things that are inconsistent with your own guidance. And you could have commented, and maybe TNDC would have seen the wisdom of being, hey, maybe we should be a good neighbor. We're part of this. We got this plume that's underlying 25 residential properties, 15 commercial mixed-use properties, and you're just saying that's above the commercial ESL, and you're saying that's okay. Let's just slap something, vapor barriers over properties that are being redeveloped by people who are making huge profits.
Don, we have not reached a point where we feel like we can select a remedy.
You already did for TN. You already did.
Yes, Don, but TNDC does not have to treat.
You could have suggested this to them consistent with DTSC guidance. I used to work under Barbara Cook's. Barbara Cook's DTSC would not have let this slip by.
I don't recall what year Barbara Cook retired, but
She would not miss this one.
This is a CLARA framework. This is not a 6.8.
It doesn't prohibit DTSC from providing comments on a response plan consistent with DTSC guidance. Here's something to think about. Who knows what TNDC would have done? But we've got remediation experts that are looking at this and go, well, this is cleanup 101. And I really would wish you would put our figure up, Asha, because you know what? You show our plume map. It's not these bifurcated separate sites. It's one plume, one problem. Gordon Marr sees that. We all see it. Can't you bring some? I mean, we're looking for some leadership.
Don, it's a CLARA framework. We can't force.
You could have commented. You missed the opportunity.
Don, if you're going to repeat the same thing by yelling, we're not going to advance a dialogue. So allow me.
So Don, let me make a suggestion that I think you pose a really good question, and I think that's something that maybe to consider. I think for Julie and Nalene, as far as when we get CLARA agreements into the office, how to integrate your request moving forward. So would it be all right if we moved the conversation to the next topic here so we can make some headway?
Yeah, I'll stop speaking. I know I'll be done speaking now, but like as Paul asked, we'd like written responses to these questions.
Yeah. So we're prepared to go through because you brought up a lot of really good questions, but in order to kind of get through each one of those, the questions as you have laid them out, I thought was a great way to sort of focus topic by topic. So if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to get back into
You can mute me from here on out, Asha. I'm
done. Donna, just to follow up. So under the California Business and Professions Code, engineers have to deal with things like SVE, mechanical equipment that's operating for 6 months or more. You said you consulted with multiple engineering firms on your recommendation. Could I have the names of those firms and those individuals so that we can corroborate your statement here? Because when we've looked internally, there's universal opinion to the contrary. So I would love to kind of confer with SV designers that you've engaged with on the engineering side. So could I have the names of the firms and the individuals that did design reviews for you on this?
So no, these are 20, 30-year environmental consultants that look at this situation.
Are they engineers authorized to opinionate on this under the Business and Professions Code?
Dan Grasmick of Apex Companies.
Dan Grasnick of Apex. Okay, and
he's
a
30-year PE?
Perfect. Did he have
this offline?
Pardon?
Can he handle this offline?
Yeah, I would suggest that. This is Julie.
That'll be fine. But Dawn.
I'll email you. Whit, I'll send you an email because I got to get some clearance because one of them may have a conflict because they represent Albrite. So let me sort that out, and I'll send you an email after this. And all right, Asha, shut me down.
Okay.
Asha, actually, I wanted to jump in.
And
so for the comment that was just raised, yes, we do owe you a written response. And it sounds like we have committed to that. And I know that to be true. So, but I don't think that we answered the second part of the previous question about vapor barrier for existing residents. And I'm not sure if that's something that we want to jump into now, but I just wanted to make sure that the question, that we at least acknowledged the question.
Yeah, so I was starting to get there earlier. So when TNDC puts in a new building, they're going to have great seismic protection compared to existing buildings. They're going to have a vapor barrier liner that protects them from current and future groundwater releases. They're going to have high efficiency energy stuff as required by Title 24. There are some opportunities for particular buildings that come by virtue of new construction that are not available to existing buildings. And one could argue that that is an environmental injustice, but there's probably a good portion of that there may be multiple truths there. And there may be a good portion of that is just when you build a new structure, you have an opportunity to do things differently than you can for existing structures. So not only is TNDC under its own sort of unique regulatory silo, it's new construction.
I understand that.
But there are other means that DTSC has under its toolkit for response actions for existing homes. And Dr. Mathrani covered that in the previous presentation. There's a slide in there that goes through the range of things, mitigations and other response actions that DTSC has available to it to do on a site-by-site, building by building even, specific basis when we encounter conditions where a site is within that risk management range. I'm not sure that may have partly but not fully answered that second part of your question. Can you kind of redirect or probe a little bit more so we're sure to answer the mail on
well, I understand that when you have the opportunity, when you're making a new building, right, you can make them seismically and all this. But you also have an opportunity when you demolish a building to, and I just feel like Don is saying, here's this great opportunity before the slab is put on. And I don't know why it feels adversarial, because ideally the government agency would be on our side and not on the side of the developer necessarily. Like, I don't know why we have to beg to be protected. It almost sounded like you were saying, well, we did this clear agreement, and does that mean you can't change it if you find new information? Because ideally, your agency would be looking out for all of us. And I mean, it's great for the new people to have that new protection, but if that money could be redirected to benefit more of us, wouldn't that be a great thing?
So TNDC has its own sort of unique little bubble that it's in, and that project will, proceed. It will have its mitigation, but around it, under it, we need to finish our characterization. And if we find conditions, if we find a source area, if we find a source area that warrants, remediation, we will look at that. And there is an opportunity when that building comes down. But, I've designed remedy systems before around buildings. I mean, there's angle boring, there's horizontal boring, and SVE, has huge radii of influences when you're in a sandy media like this. So you can even treat around a building once the building slab has been constructed. So I think that there is the bottom line is our process is general enough that it can work around all the peculiarities of individual buildings and site development, and particularly in a geology of this sort, there is time. As right. Dr. Mathrani pointed out, there's no imminent health risk right now.
I mean, I know I'm a layperson, but it seems like what the reason Don and Lenny are getting upset for us is that they want you to see this as all interconnected and not address it like, we're going to do this with this building, then we'll come to your house and see if you need an air filter, because they're saying there's a solution that's out there that it could address all of it. And do you really think they were going to put a vapor barrier if there were no PCEs? Anyways, we're trying to say, look at this as one big problem instead of each individual house.
Well, I mean, the branch chief put the same team on all these sites for a reason. We look at all these sites together for a reason. We integrate all the data for a reason. We present all the sites in common public updates for a reason, including this public meeting. I don't think there's that big a difference, but I think there's probably more commonality than difference there. I think I think from our perspective, there's more characterization to go. And we don't feel like we've found the real source area. And our heartfelt concern is that it doesn't serve the community either to rush out and put in an SVE system and run it for 6 months, go away, and then we didn't actually get the source. And 3 years later, those concentrations have reestablished. 10 years later, they've reestablished. We'd really like to make sure we've, identified the source before we design. A, to follow our process. B, to actually get the material, because SVE won't accelerate the evaporation of liquid PCE if it can't draw air over it at high velocity. If we're a great distance away, that stuff really isn't going to get taken care of. And third, we're in an old neighborhood with lots of former fuel stations and stuff, and we're also mindful that sometimes remediations, cause problems. They draw things we haven't characterized under places that didn't previously have that kind of contact, and they could accelerate, for a minority of sites, potentially localized CI problems. So we just would like to understand the landscape more comprehensively before we select a remedy. And I think there's this compelling sense of urgency on the part of MSNA that there is no way to remediate, there is no way to remediate the neighborhood once the building floor is down on the new TNDC building. But in a highly permeable geology of this type, I'm not sure that fear is warranted. I think there is time, both in a current risk exposure for the levels we're seeing to the community. I think there is time. And I don't think the door closes on remedies, even if TNDC's project, is proceeding. So I think there's a sense of urgency there that's maybe driving the MSNA perspective a little stronger than ours. And I think we're maybe more aligned than we realize, but we're envisioning kind of a different time scale and a different amount of characterization before we start.
Okay.
But I see Julie and Nalene, you have your cameras on. Did you want to?
Oh, yeah, actually.
Thank you, Adam, for those questions.
No, I was just going to say, yes, thank you, Adam. And part of the reason why Nalene and I are here is really to hear from residents such as yourself. As Whit has mentioned, additional work is needed. Truly, the additional indoor air work that I know has been planned is certainly something that would give us some additional information. And I'm hopeful that we will get that and it will be done, and we will have very good data that we can use to make future decisions. But the one thing I did want to comment on, and Whit just touched on this briefly, can we make changes to documents such as Clara response plans? The answer is yes. If there is new information that comes to light, and I'm certainly taking lots of notes tonight. And we'll definitely have some thoughts about how we move forward. But I can't make a promise to change the response plan, but certainly there is a process for that should new information come to light, which would change one or more remedies at any particular project. So I'm going to be quiet now and let my boss speak.
Asha?
Yes.
I was just wondering do you see Michael Weiss, because he's an MSNA member who explained to me that he had studied the contour maps and that there couldn't be any other sources coming in, but I don't know if he.
Yeah, it doesn't look like he's present right now.
Oh, he's not. Okay.
Yeah. And Nalene, did you want to say something?
Okay.
I see.
I was just, I guess, Adam, as you were mentioning, it's a golden opportunity when the building is demolished, and I think we agree with you. It is a golden opportunity, and we do have that, in focus as we're moving forward, and we definitely want to take advantage of that opportunity if there's some investigation work or some other action that we find is, as a result of the additional characterization that we're doing is the action that's appropriate to take. And I can definitely, as I was hearing the listening to the prior meeting that was held in June and talking to the team and hearing about your all's concerns secondhand, I'm really glad to be here and to be able to hear these things firsthand. The fragmentation, I guess I will use that word, your concern about the lack of an integrated, project, so to speak. I can understand how, as a community member, hearing our discussions and seeing the maps and the properties and hearing us describe the projects in that manner, I can understand that concern. But I just want to assure you that our team is looking at all the data as a whole, and we're taking a very close look at it and re-looking at it, and we want to be sure that we're not missing anything, because you all live in these neighborhoods, and you're seeing this data, and you're concerned about it, and we want to be responsive to you. And certainly our team this is our job, and this is what we do day in and day out, is to take into consideration the science and the data, and make sure that we are indeed protecting public health and the environment. That is our baseline. And beyond that baseline, we want to also make sure that you as the community are assured and are aware, and also to listen to what you would like us to do, and to see if there is something we can do to reach what you're asking of us within our resources and our processes, and the science, the regulations. So I'm here in that vein to help ensure that we are leaning in. And my observation is I've worked with a lot of folks in environmental field, and we have a very, very dedicated team that works long and hard on your behalf. Now, I understand you may still look at what the substance is of what we're doing and have concerns about it, and we welcome hearing those concerns, and we want to be as responsive as we can. But I just wanted to agree with you about, yes, it is a golden opportunity, and yes, we should be looking at it as one site, and although it may not seem apparent to you, we are looking at it as one site. So,
okay. Well, I really
being here.
I appreciate everything you just said, and I just hope that that's true. I like that you said you're leaning in.
Can I jump in? This is Lenny. I wanted to just talk about the source investigation.
Okay. Yeah.
So it is possible, because it's happened in my neighborhood, that a sewer main is the source. It would be a historical source, not a continuing source. That would be so extraction near this site wouldn't pull additional contamination from some theoretical dry cleaner several blocks away. But there's no evidence that that's indeed a source. We do have evidence that there may have been a source in the PCU parking lot south of Irving, because that's an area where not only are there higher levels in the shallow soil gas than the deep soil gas, but we have a report from the community that barrels were stored there. And so we'd really like that to be investigated as a potential source. Looking at the data that's available now, the best explanation of the contamination, despite what Path Forward said and blamed it all on Albrite, is that both dry cleaners had leaks in their sewer laterals, and that's responsible. But that seems to best explain the patterns that we're seeing on the map that you presented tonight. And again, obviously you need to collect more data, but that's the soil gas levels that we're seeing and the patterns that we're seeing suggest that kind of a release. Again, it is possible that it's coming from the sewer main, but you have no evidence of that.
Yeah, well, we're carrying a number of hypotheses in our conceptual site model, and that is one of them, and we certainly see the data consistent with that. There may be others. It's just there's a long history. There's a lot of businesses. So I mean, I think it's very like we're gonna have several sources,
and in terms of the timing of remediation, there's a site again in my neighborhood in Mountain View under DTSC supervision, where they did soil sampling. They found contamination in the soil, levels in the soil gases as well, and they did immediate excavation before they selected the final remedy. So there are times where it does make sense to rush a remedy, an interim remedy. So I don't want you to rule that out. There are situations where where if you pull the wrong way, you're going to spread the contamination, but you can usually determine that by the data that you have.
Agreed. Yeah, and we're still looking for that source area because it's
You've said in the past that you don't think it's a source because the levels aren't as high as they are at some of the other sites you're looking at.
If you read our stuff, we have never said there's no source there. We say that we have not found a source yet. Investigation is ongoing. But I don't think it's got a high probability of yielding a source if we do additional investigation. But we have to keep looking and turning over rocks and integrating our stuff and getting some new tools in the mix to help.
As long as people are being exposed above the screening level or potentially exposed in new buildings above the screening levels, then the fact that this might not be the worst site in California doesn't mean that it's no source. Which you implied at the June meeting.
Oh well,
you showed us other sites with much higher levels of PCE, and I know some, sure.
No.
And it's conceivable that there was greater levels of contamination in the subsurface here, and because of the sandy subsurface, they've spread over a wide area, so the concentrations have gone down over time.
I understand, but in my experience over 30 years of being a remedial engineer, we wouldn't typically deploy SVE technology if we have like 2,000 micrograms per meter cube. We're not really at the source. We want the extraction wells in the source. And I'm just saying, we haven't seen concentrations yet, particularly in this laterally this geology is much easier geology to find the source because the signals move laterally much more than in the typical type Bay Area geology.
So I'm on an EPA research team looking at vapor intrusion. Mm-hmm. And one of the things we're talking about is soil vapor extraction as a better response than building by building mitigation, more efficient, because you can deal with a whole bunch of buildings at once, not going into every home. So that may be your experience, but there's growing belief that soil vapor extraction can be used as mitigation in a situation like this.
Great. Let me just interject. One of the key things that we want to get out of this meeting was to have a little bit of time with the 6 homeowners who are reluctant to have September sampling conducted in their homes. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really important that we get a little time with them while we have Dr. Mavrani and our team available. Would you mind if we turn to their question? I think it was question number 9, and maybe, if we have time, have some back and forth with them.
Well, I'd like to follow up on that.
Okay. So
can we just pause here? I just want to make sure that we don't have any questions coming in from. Oops. Can you all hear me okay? All
yes.
Right. Hopefully that's good. I just wanted to pause here and make sure we don't have any questions from the Cantonese interpretation line. Carnation, you want to shake your head, yes or no? Okay, Carnation. Okay, all right, thank you. And then I do want to see, I know that Deborah, is it okay if I take, Deborah's had her hand raised for a bit here. Can I go ahead and take her question first, and then we move on with the indoor air? All right. Deborah, thanks for your patience. Go ahead. You'll have to click to unmute yourself first. Deborah, if you're having trouble, you want to try typing into the chat? Okay. Deborah, I'll let you see if you can, I'll try you again. Otherwise, type into the chat, and then we'll move on to the indoor air data. Okay. Oh, Deborah, I think you're opened your mic, but we can't hear you. Okay, we'll come back to you. All right, so for right now, we'll go ahead and move on to the question about indoor air. And I will see where we were in our list of questions here that we received about indoor air. If you have it up, Whit, as far as which number it was, here we go. The 6 homeowners have written to DTSC without answer. Please address their desire to have September in-home sampling only if you do a winter reading in December, January. You want to take that one?
Yeah. So we have a short and sweet answer.
Yeah, let's do that one because we've got a lot of content.
Okay, but this is complicated. But okay.
I know.
So all right. So to the homeowners, DTSC recommends the September 2020 time frame because in our understanding of the science, we view dry soil as the controlling parameter for defining conservative seasonal VI testing. That is the dry, warm season with the emphasis on the dry. From a funding perspective, our 3-year contractor cycle is terminating. We cannot fund an additional testing round, so we have to do either September or winter 2022-23, but we can't offer both from a funding perspective. DTSC Hero has looked at this and they can proceed with forthcoming DTSC VI risk evaluation using only the March 2020 data that DTSC generated and winter data as you've requested. However, DTSC would decline to assess risk based on the September 2021 data at all. So that would mean in our model, we're proceeding to the risk evaluation without the most conservative seasonal condition with good conservative data, which would be when the soil's at the driest after the winter, the long summer season. And with the termination of the current DTSC multi-year contract holders, the new contracts are awarded in November. We may be able to do a kind of a holdover thing, but I can't guarantee anything for you. It's procurement. It has to pass through procurement. There is a possibility if we do it in winter that there's a possibility we might be able to do it with the same consultant, which would be great for all of us. They did a great job last time, and we want to have that continuity of information, continuity of understanding of the homes to make sure we have reproducibility and comparability of data. We don't have any missteps with a new consultant. So we hope to be able to reuse that consultant in winter. But because of the contract changes, there's a possibility that we'd have to use a new DTSC contractor in winter. And with that, there's sort of secondary things like if they want to do a new work plan because it's not their work plan, we don't have a lot of extra budget. So there are some state funding risks that are kind of low probability, some schedule risks. So we could proceed with winter. Hero's fine proceeding with that, although we would not have any September data, any dry season data to use in that risk assessment. And there's maybe a less than 50-50 chance we might have to have a new consultant performing that with some of the disadvantages of having a new player in what should be kind of a reproduced type of setting. So
I think given all that information, the 6 homeowners would rather we go ahead with the winter testing. I mean, if you were willing to do both, that doesn't sound like an option.
I'm afraid not.
Also, I don't know why you're not able to use the old September. Like, was that just a complete waste of time, that testing?
No, it wasn't. Vivek, did you want to take that, or you want me to?
Isn't that when the windows were open?
Yeah, well,
there were variable conditions, sampling conditions under which those indoor air samples were collected. And also there were clear indicators that there was some source inside the indoor space that was off-gassing. So we weren't seeing a vapor intrusion signal. The indoor air concentrations for PC and TC were not consistent with the vapor intrusion pathway. So it provided proof of concept that consumer products or some other source inside the homes could be contributing to what we measure. And it just meant for better housekeeping in the subsequent
right. I think
air quality sampling.
Referring to my neighbor. My neighbor had a very high reading, maybe because of some
TC, and that was completely gone by the next episode when we removed it.
Right, but the other 5 houses didn't have that issue though.
There is one house where we're seeing some patterns that would also suggest consumer products, and there are very extensive. There's some rooms that are full of boxes, very difficult to enter, and for that building, if we were to redo it this September, there were some additional samples we were going to employ to help factor out what's a possible, maybe even likely consumer product source in that building. So I think we'd be reluctant to use I think we'd be reluctant to use the data in that building as well.
Lenny, can you weigh
conservative? But the bottom line, without getting in all of it, Hero would not be comfortable using that data and stop. So we would just proceed using 2 what we would call wet season data points, March and midwinter.
So nationally, people don't talk about wet and dry. They talk about winter versus non-winter, or heating season versus non-heating season. Mm-hmm. And I've always wondered, based on the Mark Twain quote that the worst winter he ever spent was a summer in San Francisco, whether that really applies to San Francisco. And I have very limited data to base it on, but the data I do have are the 4 sampling points in the PCU building. And 3 of those 4 sampling points, the highest levels of contamination of PCE in indoor air were the samples taken in December. Now, I know it's a limited data set, but it is local. And that's the basis upon which I've suggested that the neighbors ask for a December sampling.
And Lenny, I would offer that, given your perspective on San Francisco weather patterns, I could be agnostic to sampling in September versus December. My main concern as a risk assessor is, if you recall, DTSC used to do vapor intrusion screening evaluations using the Johnson-Edinger spreadsheet model, which was very, very sensitive to water-filled porosity of soils, so soil moisture content. And from that perspective, and for that reason, we don't use the Johnson-Edinger model as a primary line of evidence for vapor intrusion risk. Mm-hmm. Similarly speaking, that's where my recommendation would still be to sample after the dry season, because soils are presumably more permeable and transmissible, and there's a minimal amount, at least the minimum amount of soil moisture that might attenuate vapor. So that's from my perspective, but mm-hmm. I take your point that
there are several factors that influence the levels of vapor intrusion.
No doubt.
Pressure, temperature,
I do.
Use of heaters.
And I do think controlling the indoor conditions of the home, that being sealing the any conduit for passive ventilation, doing a thorough chemical inventory, those are going to drive our results a lot more than climactic conditions. And ultimately, I am very aware that these are residences, and going in and doing an indoor air quality investigation is contingent on being granted access. So. But that's the DTSC perspective, and just something for your consideration.
And for the one home that had very high levels of PCE in the first sample and none in the second, I'm hoping since no one found, it was throughout the home, and no one found the background source, that I hope you're working pretty hard to find out why there was so much variation between the 2 sampling periods.
Yeah, we definitely acknowledge it as an anomaly. So.
Right. Thank you so much. I hate to have to do a time check on us, but it is after 8, and we scheduled this meeting from 6:30 to 8. I think we're willing to stay. I think, realistically, we're not. We've only sort of touched on a few of the questions that that were posed to us by MSNA. And so we'll just commit to getting a written response, and we will share those responses with everyone. And so in the interest of time, I think we're willing to go until 8:15. And I'd like to get to some of the folks that we haven't heard from yet. We've got some in the Q&A, so if y'all don't mind, we can just pivot to some of the Q&As and see what we can fit in here. So Robert, you have a couple of Q&As. I wonder, do you want to ask them, or you want me to read them out loud here? Let me just get your mic open to see if you want to do that. I know that there's this one question that you have posed, and I think you actually had posed it in the last meeting as well. And if you don't want to read it out loud, I can read it here for everyone. You should be able to see it. For DTSC's responsiveness summary dated September 2021, page 11, DTSC's approval of the TNDC's response plan seemed to be based upon your understanding that all construction excavation for the project would be shallow. However, TNDC now intends to construct a drilled pier foundation, which likely would not be shallow. During the community meeting with TNDC on August 17th, the contractor would not answer our specific question regarding the drilled pier design, namely the depth, diameter, and quantity. How is DTSC's approval of TNDC's response plan still be valid, considering the foundation design has changed so dramatically? Are there any DTSC staff that would be able to weigh in on this question from Robert?
Yeah, so the again, the response plan, because it's a Clara site, the owner really has, the only hard requirement they have is that they mitigate, they just have to be protective in whatever form they choose to of the future occupants of their building. So the type of remedy that they have selected is designable around a range of foundation types, whether it's piers, piles, displacement piers, grade beams, slab on grade. All of those classes of foundations, are adaptable to vapor barrier and sub-slab depressurization design. So in our estimation, they're going to have to submit potentially modified design drawings, which are already included in the response plan appendices, potentially. But yeah, that to us, it doesn't change the mitigation that they've chosen under their response plan. What it might do is change the detailed design, but that would be that's our perspective.
All right, thanks, Ed.
Is my mic on?
Yes. Go ahead, Robert.
Well, I understand that that the vapor mitigation system could be constructed under various different types of foundations. But my point of the point of the question really seems to be: is it safe? Is the drill pier design, which is not going to be shallow, going to unearth a lot of soil, a lot more than what was previously anticipated? And there will be workers on site who will be exposed to soil that's unearthed. The public will be exposed to that. And it's a different foundation system. I'm talking about the safety of the construction method versus not whether the vapor intrusion mitigation system could be applicable for either or.
Thank you for that clarification. So in our construction programs, and so this, I have so many sites. So this site, I believe, and I can confirm this after the meeting, has a soil management plan for the construction activities. I believe it has a perimeter monitoring program during construction for VOCs, dust, and which is standard for us for construction projects, where we have either volatile or non-volatile contaminants for dust, and for volatile contaminants, perimeter monitoring for that. So it's really, it probably warrants a re-review of those community protection documents, but it is very common for us to work with private developers, utility companies, power companies, water suppliers, to protect their workers from dermal contact or inhalation exposure to PC or other volatile chemicals in the course of doing their construction work. So the construction industry is set up to address that as part of their construction planning documents. And we often review those documents as part of our oversight of construction that is related to or intersects with our jurisdiction for the decision document. So it's a good question you raise, and we'll take a look back at the documents that have been prepared as part of the response plan and make a note of that those are issues that need to be looked at by DTSC, to the extent that we have a nexus with the construction planning documents for that site. So thank you for raising that angle on some of the documents that we have already finalized for that site.
Thanks, Robert. And Joan, you had a couple of questions in the Q&A. Would you like to just open up your mic and speak to us, or would you like me to read off your comment?
If you could read them off, because I had to log off, and so I can't see my original questions, and then I got back in. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Okay. So Joan's first question here is, let's get to it. Okay. They get what you approve, and in our meeting with us, they said they would be willing to cooperate on doing more testing during demolition. And if DTSC thinks there's a holistically better solution, they'd cooperate with a different plan. Do you want to provide any clarification on that, Joan?
Just when we had a meeting with them, Lenny and Don were in that meeting. I just asked, that golden opportunity that we're all talking about. I asked if they would be willing to allow more testing, since there's only been within the Miracle footprint one point of testing versus the other 49 around the site. And they said yes. And then when we also asked, even if that means the recommendation changes from VIMS to SBE, and they said yes. So I guess my question just is, have they or have you had that conversation about, okay, before we dig into this soil, after demolition, but before the deep digging happens, have you discussed doing more testing?
In our periodic statics meetings with them, we have talked about some hypotheticals in terms of coordinating work under our oversight with their construction phasing. But they have certain immunities under a CLARA framework. So those discussions were largely in the context of having a third party doing that work on their property. But we have talked conceptually about how that might occur. And I think that's probably as far as I can take it, just because it is so prospective and forward looking, and we don't have a party right now that we feel we can engage in that capacity.
Thank you.
Thanks. I appreciate that. I think I am sensitive to, MSNA. You mentioned earlier, like the MSNA is driving some urgency around that, and I think that yes, we are, because they're announcing their plans to move ahead with demolition, and so not knowing, well, okay, is there some sort of agreement between the various parties to do testing before, after demolition, and before construction, because things are moving fast. So yes, we do have a sense of urgency around that. So I mean, I'm glad to hear those conversations are happening.
Yeah, but again, it's hypothetical, it's perspective. It depends in part on us finding, a party we can engage. We have requested the DTSC be notified at junctures like, excavation of elevator banks, during some of the piling work, when they're doing excavation for utility corridors, opportunities when transects will be excavated to deeper subgrades, and there's an opportunity for DTSC staff to inspect with instrumentation where we could maybe catch a signal of PCE or CVOCs or sea soil staining. So, we have an understanding that we will be given advance notice so we can have an opportunity to have boots on the ground post demolition when some of that, during that year when they are post demolition and preparing for their slab construction in 2024, we have the ability to get insight into other potential unrecognized problems, odor, staining, VOC measurements, when they're starting to do some of that ground invasive work in 2023. We're mindful of that opportunity, and we knew that would be of interest to you. And we've included it on slide 9 of tonight's presentation. So we too are keeping our eye on that opportunity window.
And
all right,
just as my last little follow on that, because that was one of the last question I just posted, was just to follow on to Robert's question about the deep pier drilling. Mm-hmm. Is there a concern with the drilling disturbing the site in terms of, well, the plume is going in this direction or it's spreading this way, but when they start doing that kind of digging, do we lose the opportunity to track the plume? And is it better to do the kind of deep testing before they start digging that deep? I don't know.
No, that's a fair question. I think our perspective would be that you're in a deep sandbox, and so far we've got a very dilute soil gas plume of PCE in the pore spaces of that sand. And in installing a foundation system, you're going to put down some solid columns within that sandbox, but the gas can readily move around in the sand and will find its way through the more permeable, more porous portions of that geology, and it'll hit those piles and move on. In an odd way, at least for the modest depths that those piers may be installed, if they are advanced with kind of conventional auger technology, and we don't know we understand the type of foundation systems that are going to be put in. We don't know the means and methods that will be selected by the ground improvement contractor that would be selected. But if it is sort of an auger type technology, in a way, it's a chance for a DTSC, staff person to be on site and to, actually monitor the cuttings as they're coming up at some locations. So in a way, it's almost like a free drilling exercise for kind of qualitative, and we could even collect samples during that. So, potentially there's a potential to, get a little bit of additional quantitative or semi-quantitative data to advance our understanding of that portion of the program. But no, we don't think it closes the door on the usual investigation approaches for characterizing sites. Is that clear, Joan, or did you need a follow-up? Okay.
Yeah, that's clear. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sorry to have to wrap things up here. There's a lot of continued opportunity for engaging and a number of topics, not only what MSNA provided, but what you all have shared during this meeting. And we look forward to continued opportunities to do so. So we'd like to schedule another public meeting before the year is out and continue to engage with you. We'll get a set of written responses out and follow up from there. Just really wanted to thank you for taking the time to spend the evening with us. I think, Whit, do you mind advancing to the next slide there? Before we wrap up, I just wanted to make sure everyone knows how to get more information. You can access the technical documents on EnviroStor. Each site has its landing page, and a copy of this presentation is already uploaded on EnviroStor. You can also sign up to receive email alerts when new documents are uploaded, and let me know if you need any assistance with this. Next slide, please. And here's contact information for us if you have any questions that you have about any of the sites. We do apologize for the delays in getting back to you, and we hope to get back on track once we're fully staffed. That takes us to the end of our public meeting. And I wonder, Nalene, do you have any last words that you'd like to share with us?
I'm just really grateful to be here and hear your concerns firsthand, and I'll be getting with our team and talking about your concerns and making sure that we're doing all that we can to be responsive over and above our to the extent that we can, and it's appropriate within our resources and all those things. But we're lenient. I will be working with our team to lean toward your concerns and perspectives. And I just want to reiterate that this team has been works long and hard to make sure that we are overseeing work and having work done on your behalf that is thorough and accurate and serves as a sound basis for decisions. And they indeed are working in ways that that are for your benefit and addressing some of the concerns that you've already raised. And so really glad for all of your candidness and all of the perspectives that you shared, and really glad to be here.
Thank you, Nalene, and thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.